Yep.
All right,
Do it.
let's go. Let's go. I believe we're live. We should be. I think this is just happening as we
Cool.
talk, as we speak. I always gonna let a couple of seconds go because sometimes I was almost sure that we were live, and then for whatever reason I wasn't because I pressed the wrong button or something, and people were like, what's going on? Like, why don't I see? I don't see no screen or whatever. But we are live, and everything is going fine and smooth. See, this is what happens when my producers are not here, and I'm talking about Andrew and John. They just abandoned me on the stream, guys.
Nope. Andrew does make it go a lot smoother. He's very good.
Yeah,
He's a very
Andrew
dude.
is he's a master of sandwiches. He's Chipotle and all that stuff, and he's also Dave Franco. So
Wow.
it just cannot go wrong when you have such a team. So yeah. Anyways, kind of
Wait,
went
one thing.
off.
Isn't he trying to distance himself from Chipotle? I just need to ask. I thought that Chipotle was
I
done.
think so, but the problem is that I don't want to let him.
Okay, all right. That's a very mature answer. So, all right.
In a very similar fashion that you don't want to let go the potato stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
actually
fair.
started embracing it, and believe it or not, but some of the Twitter stuff and potatoes and Twitter, not Twitter, sorry, Twitch. Some of the shenanigans happening there, yeah, it's pretty good. We went to some Illuminati shit there, so
Good.
yeah, it's getting deeper into potatoes. Anyways, so we are live tonight. It's Friday. I'm pretty sure normal folks are enjoying that time partying or something like that, but we are artists, so we don't party.
That's not what
And we have a pretty interesting stream today because that's a conversation that a lot of people are asking for. There was quite a lot of QA questions happening every now and then over past art cafes, which is about U.S. immigration and how it is to get visas and what does it take to work here. And I figured I'm gonna try to find a friend and a person that knows everything that I know, went through the same process almost on all occasions, and went through some of the bullshit that kind of comes across when you really want to come here and live in America. Um, and it so happened that that person is Alex, who was already here previously. I think we had a stream about video games, if I'm correct, right? Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, we talked about it was like a bunch of different people from Sony Santa Monica and from Naughty Dog and
Right,
all that stuff. And
I
it came
remember
up
that.
kind of briefly, but not we didn't really discuss it in detail.
And then, to your credit, we also managed to invite your friend as well, an actual lawyer, believe it or not.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, it's Robert. I'm gonna probably butcher your last name, Herrera. Is that how you say it?
Close enough. No, it's Herreria.
Herrera. Okay, I
Yeah.
apologize. I'm from Poland, so I can excuse myself pretty much for any offenses that I do, because because like
I
because
don't accept. I never accept. So you don't have to either. Don't feel pressured to accept.
I know. But anyways, maybe let's start with this. Robert, if you could just talk a little bit about yourself, so that our listeners can know exactly what you do in a little more details, and then Alex, you could do the same, and then we can jump right into the conversation.
Sure.
Does that sounds good?
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, geez, where to start? So lawyers like to talk a lot about themselves, so I'm going to try to curb myself as much as I can. I started actually in immigration as a paralegal before I even went to law school. This was years ago now. I want to say maybe 8 years ago. And I was working at an immigration law firm there in Boston. And that firm was primarily focused on working with employers on bringing their employees, getting them the right paperwork to come into the United States. First as, and I'm going to get into technical terms in a bit, so I'll try to maybe explain those as those come along. Typically, a lot of people come in as what we call non-immigrants. They come in on temporary visas at first, allow them to work and stay in the U.S. for temporary periods, and then with the ultimate goal of maybe looking at green cards and hopefully maybe even citizenship later down the road. So I started there as a paralegal, figured I liked it a lot. Against all the advice from the attorneys I was working with there, I decided to go to law school. And then at the end of law school, I decided I wanted to get back into immigration. I've got my parents are both from the Philippines, and they immigrated to the U.S., and they've got a great story. And I really got into it because of learning and hearing about people's stories, how they immigrated here, and I wanted to be able to help with the legal part of that. So that fast forwards me to today. I'm an attorney and associate with a firm called Jackson and Hertogs in San Francisco in the Bay Area. We assist a lot of employers, of course, the tech startups that are based there, a couple of game developers actually, a lot of other industries, and doing the same thing, helping those companies work with their employees to secure, again, a foot in the door with a non-immigrant visa type or something like that, or going through the green card process and helping them navigate what it's required for them to come to the U.S., work here, and make a life here. That's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's responsible, and I know it's pretty difficult job to do. And I've been through a roller coaster of different lawyers, and I can tell.
I apologize.
There's some that take it really seriously and really try. There are some that I don't want to name and never will. Allegedly, I've heard. I heard. Is it true if I say allegedly that just basically absolves me from all responsibility of what I say?
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's definitely lawyers that don't take things seriously and lose documents and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's really interesting to know how the whole process looks like. And it's funny because, like, again, as I said, both me and Alex kind of went through very similar stories and processes. Alex, you were a little different though, because you came from Canada, right?
Yeah. So I think that the only difference would have been that I had a NAFTA visa, a TN visa, which isn't. Robert actually knows all the facts on this. This might be wrong. I don't think it's a real visa, right? It's like
No,
it's not the same.
It's different. So I'm going to try to avoid being as legalese and technical as I can. But so for persons coming from Canada, if you have a Canadian passport, the immigration laws have specific basically outs. It makes the process a little bit easier. And one of those things that Alex is talking about is as a part of the NAFTA, which I'm sure is on everybody's minds now, considering the U.S. election and what's going on there. As part of the NAFTA, there's a visa type called the TN, and it's weird calling it a visa type because what it really does for Canadian folks, it's actually available for persons from Mexico as well, but specifically for persons from Canada. They can basically just to go to the U.S. border and directly apply at the border to come in, as long as they qualify under this NAFTA specific thing. So they don't have to, a lot of people, if you're familiar with the process even passingly, a lot of people have to go to a U.S. consulate or a U.S. embassy, and you have to apply for a visa stamp, and you have to wait ridiculous amount of time to be able to come in. For Canadians, that's not necessarily true. You don't have to do that process. You can just go either to an international airport that's coming to the U.S., or you can go to the U.S. border, and you can apply directly there. The actual reality of how that works is a lot more complicated, of course, but it's simpler in that sense, and that's kind of what the TN is about. And then the other important thing that like Alex was just saying, there's some specifics to it. Under the TN, there's some really specific categories that you have to fit under in order to qualify. Alex, I actually should have checked in with you first. If are you okay with me talking about the details of your case? It's one of the ethical things I have to do as an attorney.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm pretty open
Okay.
with that stuff with anybody that asks. So
Okay.
yeah, no, it's cool.
Just got to get it on record and all that. But so for Alex's case, there's a specific category called for graphic designers. So if you have a certain if your professional background, if you can prove that you've done a certain level of graphic design work, or if you have a degree in that, you can qualify for this TN category under the NAFTA, and you can come to the U.S. doing that. But as Alex could probably tell you, the reality is it's a lot more difficult. You encounter folks at the U.S. border who are exceedingly hard to work with. I want to be diplomatic about it, but it's a very it's a very difficult process. That's but it's there. There's something basically the long and the short of it is there's a specific thing for Canadian nationals that the current treaty, the NAFTA treaty, allows for.
Right. I guess it's like when you go to the border and they ask, graphics designer? That's not a real job. My brother did a website for free for me, so I don't know about that. I'm joking. It's
I have gotten people that have been real hard ass about it and been like, graphic design, eh? There's a lot of people that have that for their TN. And you're like, yeah, well, like, it is what I do. I'm sorry. Like, I feel like I'm one of the few people maybe that I legitimately did that as my job. So
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry I'm doing graphic design for one of the best companies. One of the best video games companies out there. I'm really
I do have
sorry
to say,
that I make money making it too.
I had so many people, I still do, who are like, Naughty Dog. Is Uncharted 4 gonna be good? I was like, yeah. They're like, cool. So like we can get past all this stuff. You can just like let me in now, right? Like it was always like a yeah when they liked games.
For me, it was interesting when I was applying for visa myself with my family. It was when I was back in Germany, and I went for because it's a totally different process, and I'm sure we're gonna get into details because that's probably what the majority of people here want to hear about. So it's a funny anecdote. When I was in Germany, I was there for an interview before my visa was supposed to be approved, and the immigration officer is looking at the application, like looking at me really weird all the time. I was like, what is his deal, right? What's going on there? And then and he looked up, so what exactly is Naughty Dog?
Oh yeah, I've gotten some of those too. Like a dog training?
What kind of company is that? What kind of company is Naughty Dog? And for someone who doesn't follow video games, that's like that could be kind of funny. But then like when we were flying in, and our visa status was being checked on the airport before we entered. Like one of the officers checking the status, like super nerd of Uncharted, was like, "Oh, Naughty Dog! Oh shit!" Like, hell yeah! Like, yeah, it's gonna go smooth then, I guess.
It is important to note that they do have those officers have jurisdiction. Like they can say if you're being a dick to them, they can be like, "Cool, not letting you in."
Yeah.
So they have the final say on those things. And so every time I went to the border, be very polite. And I mean, you should do this anyway. You should be a polite person no matter what.
Don't want to be a dick in
but
general, like
if
me.
you are a person that tends to be a bit of an asshole, you should keep in mind that they can absolutely tell you that they're not going to let you in. It is they have final say over that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think they can do that with a green card, though. Am I right with that, Robert?
Actually, they can't.
All right. So I guess I'll never be a dick to a border patrol agent.
Just get naturalized as soon as you can, and then you can be a dick as all you. No, I'm just kidding. But one of the big things about the border so the agency we're talking about here is U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So it's a part of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which of course was put into place after the events of 9/11 and all of that. Um, the reason I just spouted all that out is that does give context to how the CBP acts, the Custom Officers Act. They have huge chips on their shoulders a lot of times, and maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. They feel that they are in the position where they're protecting the U.S. from persons who could harm it, and the law empowering them has given them a lot of leeway, a lot of authority at the border to say either, okay, we think you're fine to come in, we're going to let you in, or we think we don't like you because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and we're not going to let you into the U.S. because we think, at some point you're going to harm the U.S. in some way. Whether or not that's factually actually true, of course, it varies. But that's the position they're in. They hold a lot of power at the border. And Alex is absolutely right. One of the things that I tell my clients all the time is try to be, just be as diplomatic as you can. You might run into an officer who's having a terrible day. They just heard bad news from their family or something like that, and that affects the way that they're working and letting people in. Or they maybe have missed breakfast and they're just really hungry. Either way, you want to just be diplomatic about when you're talking with these folks. And then the other thing I always tell clients is that they should try to go, if they're ever going to the border at all, they should try to go during quote unquote normal business hours between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Because anytime you go to the border outside of those times or on the weekends, you're going to get officers who are either they're not really happy to be there at those off hours, or they're not really well trained. So you're going to run into difficulties there. But yeah, they hold a lot of power at the borders, and it's just something that I don't see that part of U.S. immigration going away anytime soon.
Yeah, that's true. No, I've noticed that usually everyone is just chill, just like let's just get through that. You have to wait in the 40-minute line anyways, especially on LAX, or even sometimes the line is like an hour. So it's like a long wait, and you're like, the last thing you want to do is get pissy and then you're like, yeah, well, fly home.
Yeah,
that kind of deal. After 15-hour flight, you're like, yeah, time to go back.
If you travel a lot, if you go through the airports a lot, you're invariably going to get an officer who is just having that bad day, or they might treat you, they might be the rudest officer alive. And the only thing you can do is just try to be on your best behavior, because if it is in fact an officer who is just completely out of line, that they hold a lot of power at that moment. But you also, in your way, if you are doing everything you can to obey what they're asking, try to answer as truthfully as and of course you have to tell them the truth.
Yeah, of course.
But if you're trying to cooperate as much as possible, if you can get that on the record that you weren't doing anything on your end wrong, you at least have that going for you if for some reason you have to challenge it later.
Yeah, because for whatever reason, like let's say if they really tell you fly home, and then you're just about to start a new job or something like that, you can always contact your HR and then try to get solved. Because the problem is like when you get your entry rejected, from what I've been hearing, and you can probably correct me on that, is that it just becomes a little more difficult to come back. Is that true, or?
No, that's true. And part of the other thing that's a new trend in immigration, maybe not so new anymore, is that there's a lot of data collection out there now.
Right.
The U.S. government hasn't been great, of course, with technology, but they're getting there. So they're recording entries now. They're doing it a lot more with regularity. I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there are familiar with the new electronic I-94 system, where you can look and check your entries to the U.S., which is a great system in some ways, because you can log on, you can find out where U.S. immigration has recorded your last entries to the U.S. But
I didn't
the
know
U.S.
that.
government, That's actually so. So the website is I think you just if you could do a Google search for I-94, you can easily find it. I'm not remembering the full address right now, but it's pretty easy to find.
Hmm.
But the other thing you have to be aware of is that the flip side is that the U.S. government's got they're recording all this information now, so they can see when you've tried to enter the border at let's say like Vancouver versus if you try to re-enter again over at Peace Bridge, just using Canada to the U.S. as an example, they can see all that.
Yeah.
So that informs them. So you just want to be aware.
I mean, I get that's it's actually good, right? I mean, they want to make sure that you're not trying to enter when you're rejected for whatever reason. They want to have like a safety measure, like check why exactly you were rejected on that entry, and stuff like that. I want to kind of roll back a
Yeah.
little bit and sort of maybe go through the whole process of how, let's say for whatever reason, your portfolio is great and you get that job offer from a studio in US, and let's say they do a phone interview, it goes great, and you get an invite to come over for an on-site interview. So to my experience, it looks pretty much like this. If you're from the country that has a visa waiver program with United States, that means you're just buying tickets and flying in. There's certain things you have to do prior to flight, which usually every airline has like a good guideline of what you have to prepare in order to not screw up even on the visa waiver thing as well. And then you
Yep.
just fly in for an interview. In cases like mine, where my country, even though it's in NATO and it's been fucking the ally of the United States like in forever, they're still not in the visa waiver program, whereas other countries are. I think it's the only country in Europe that is not a visa waiver program. It must be that delicious potatoes that are in Poland that they're just afraid of.
That must be it.
So for me, it was I had to get a traveling visa, and I got actually a business travel visa for 10 years when I was applying. I don't remember exactly why they got me that one, because normally you just get the tourist visa, on which you're just flying in. And here's a tricky question, because I've heard mixed guidelines of what you're supposed to say on the border when they ask you why you're entering US. Some people are saying, yeah, I'm just flying here for a job interview, which I believe someone could argue is actual work. And I don't know if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something you could perhaps talk about a little bit, or?
Yeah, definitely. No, I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. No, yeah, I can talk about that for sure. Um, so in my view, so I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it kind of two ways because that's how lawyers think. We always,
Right.
we make the positive argument and we always try to think of what the negative argument is and what we have to counter. Actually, so maybe I'll start with that negative first. A lot of border officers that you might encounter might see that as let me go back to first what the B1, B2, that visa is.
Yeah.
So that visa is coming in, you're coming to the US, and your intent is supposed to be you're only going to stay here temporarily, either because you're coming here as a tourist, so that's part of the tourist visa part, or you're coming for business, which is the business part. And for business, that means you're just going to be coming to attend short meetings with some company or some entity in the US, and then your intent is you're going to leave. So I could easily see a border officer saying, "Hey, wait a minute! You're coming here for job interviews. That means your intent is that means you intend to stay in the U.S. for a long time," which is not necessarily true. A lot of things can happen with a job interview. You might not get the job. You may be interviewing for a job in the U.S., but it's for somewhere else. A whole bunch of things. So, in that sense, an officer, they could take it the wrong way. And I think it all has to do with the way that you phrase your answer.
Right.
This isn't to say, this is not to say that you should lie or misrepresent the truth. And I would never, ever advise a client or anybody to do that. But I would say that, even when you're telling the truth, there are certain ways that you can phrase your answer. There are certain ways you can still make sure you're absolutely answering the questions that are asked of you, but you're not providing, extraneous information that a border officer could suddenly go off the rails and say, oh, well, I feel like that's a reason to deny you. So here's where I flip to the positive side, where I say that, if you have an officer who's asking you what the purpose of your visit is, I would say you could feel comfortable just saying, hey, I'm just visiting companies where in the United States for potential work opportunities. Just keep your answer as simple as you can. I normally would say, just a job interview, an invite for a job interview should be harmless, and you can answer that way. But I do want to always caution that you are going to run into perhaps that one officer who either thinks that that's your intent to stay here permanently, or
Yeah, that's true.
Or I've heard this a lot from a lot of clients where they run into officers who outright say, hey, you're coming to the U.S. to steal our jobs. No joke. Now it sounds like a
Damn.
stereotype, but I have had a couple of clients now tell me they've run into that, and part of that was they went to lesser traveled or trafficked borders, or sometimes they went to the border crossing at non-business hours, and they ran into an officer who, again, it's either they're not well trained, they're not experienced. Sometimes they just are a little bit maverick, and they do that. So the thing I would tell people is of course, again, you cannot lie. You have to answer the questions that are asked of you truthfully. But you can also just keep your answers short and simple. Just answer the question that the officer asks of you, and sometimes you'll get an officer who may ask you a question and then stay silent. They might be writing notes down, or they might be typing something into their computer. They're using that as a technique to try to get you to volunteer more than you need to.
Right.
So, again, just answer simply. Say, like in the example of the interview, you could say, hey, I'm visiting, whatever the company is. You don't even have to mention that's really an interview. You're just saying, I'm meeting people at X company.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to answer. I think that's you're still being truthful, because that's who you're meeting with, and you're not lying.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And that was what I was told to do as well. Just say, yeah, I'm coming for a meeting, business meeting with X and Y. So after that, what happens is I'm just gonna sort of continue the story the way I see it and remember, is you get a stamp in your passport. You usually get like a little card with it. I don't remember what it's called, but it basically has a date on which you're supposed to leave United States, which is basically like how long you can stay. It's basically attached to one of the pages of your passport.
Yeah.
And I've heard you should not lose it ever.
Yeah. That's actually that's the I-94 card.
Right.
And like I was mentioning earlier, the U.S. immigration has moved that to an online system now. So, in fact, I believe they've stopped giving out the I-94, the paper cards, entirely. So it's important now for anybody coming into the U.S. to check online after they come into the U.S. On the online I-94 system. But that's probably what you got.
Yeah. That was that, and it used to be that when you leave, you give it back to the officer. I've heard that if you don't do that, you might actually get banned from entry for like 10 years or something like that. Is that true?
No, not necessarily. And because again, it moved online, that shouldn't happen anymore.
Right. Okay.
What sometimes in very rare situations, what used to happen was if you didn't give that card back when you exited the U.S., U.S. immigration didn't have any record of that you actually left.
Right.
So in the dark ages of 10 years ago, when the U.S. government was still not as computer savvy, they didn't have good records. So they thought
Gotcha.
in some cases that somebody didn't leave and they were still here. So that's basically the reason why. But that shouldn't be happening anymore.
Okay. That's good to know. That's one of the headaches to be removed from your head when you're entering. So after that, let's say interview goes well and someone gives you a job offer. There's two types of visas that you might be eligible for, and to my understanding, there's H-1B and there's O-1. From what I understand, H-1B is a visa that is perhaps the easiest to get as a worker. It has its own set of rules, obviously, and from what I hear, it's a little worse than O1 in terms of like what can you do after that. But it's easier to get. But the only problem is that companies have a limited amount of those visas every year because they are granted by the government to the companies. So they have X amount, and usually when it comes to video game studios, those will go to programmers because they usually need programmers more than they need concept artists or illustrators or designers. So your only option might be applying for O1. Now, O1 has requirements, and maybe we could go into like what exactly you need to be prepared for when you really want to be on O1. Because like for instance, when I was applying, I didn't qualify for H1B at all. Like I was like, you don't qualify. You're not even considered for that visa. The only options you have is O1, and for that they needed the X amount of years of experience or X amount of years of bachelor's degree, like having a bachelor's degree or equivalent of that in experience years of experience in work, like you're actually working in that industry. Robert, do you exactly know what those numbers are?
I'm sorry, in terms of which one? The
O1.
The O1? There's not an exact number that I could really quote. So the O1 is for extraordinary ability.
Yeah.
And the law they do have specific requirements on what you need to show to qualify for the O1.
Yeah.
It's typically a combination of things like you've received national or internationally recognized awards. The typical go-to I always go to is, the Nobel Prize is the one that people know. But if you've won awards in art that are, recognized by a country or internationally across the world, that's great. Even if you have maybe lesser known awards that still might be pretty significant, that's important. Because if you have a bunch of those are an indication that your work is recognized, that somebody values your work, where you've earned awards for that. And then there are a couple of other things, publications about your work, publications that have been written about you. If U.S. Immigration sees that there are a bunch of writers out there who have, they've reviewed your work, they've lauded it as something that's interesting or groundbreaking, that's good evidence. The other things that they typically look for is if you've published your own things, in the case of artists, that might be in terms of what work you might have put out there. If you've got an extensive amount of work that's been received really well by the community, that might be something. It's usually more of a combination of those things. And I'd say, in terms of getting yourself to the point where you might qualify for the O1, I think it's very similar. And I'm an outsider to the art world, but I'd like to think I at least know some things because of my knowledge of the O1. I think it is similar to building up your portfolio in the sense that you're trying to basically collect all of the works that you've done, show that you've got a good amount of experience in whatever type of art you specialize in. But it's also taking an extra step where you're trying to also gather evidence of the either art institutions or countries or states or stuff like that having recognized the value of your art. That's the other piece of it. And it's really more of a combination of those things. And the interesting thing about the O1 and the related visa called the related green card pathway called the EB1 is that it's more of It's less of a hard line with, say, like the H-1B, where you have to have a bachelor's degree or the position requires a bachelor's degree in a specific type of field. With the O1 and the EB1, they're don't get me wrong, they're very difficult. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you have a lot more leeway in where you can show a combination. If you've got a great portfolio and you have a lot of people recognizing you for what you've done, you can provide that as evidence instead. It's less of a hard line type thing. If you can provide a good combination of evidence, that might be enough for you.
Yeah.
So that's one of the good things about the O1 there.
Yeah, that's what I was told too. Like, it's never enough, right? Like whatever you can gather, whatever that is, even if it's like a small print somewhere, bring that in because every single thing can chip into your chances of getting in there.
Yeah.
If you worked on video games or on some projects that were well received by the community already, like nice games or whatever, or a film that you worked on, or did illustrations for books that were selling really well and are popular. Those things matter. They'll speak really well for your case and
Yeah.
get you better chances. If you publish your work, let's say you have those books out there, Digital Art Masters and Expose and all those books that are the art books that are coming out every now and then. I was so lucky that I had quite a bunch of publications already, including some of the book covers as well, which tremendously helped because it was just noted. All right, this guy was on the cover of this, and that, and those are like actual art books recognized by the industry as as a standard. So that was really helpful and helped the O1 case. It's a really difficult thing that I've heard. Like, just you have to be really good, more or less, to be able to apply for O1. Now H1B is a little different. Let's say if let's say a company can get you on H1B. How different is that process?
Sorry, just a second. One thing about the before we switch about
Yeah,
the
go ahead,
O.
Alex.
Um, sorry, I'm talking very little because it's so hard for me to talk and paint at the same time.
No, it's all right.
But I was really like overwhelmed because I'm not nearly as known as Mache, and UI is pretty difficult to get like known in anyways. So I was like, I Nobel Peace Prize of UI definitely don't have that. And I was very little publications. I had The Last of Us, which was probably my biggest selling point. But I had to transfer onto the O1 from a TN because TN is what's called, it's not dual intent. So you cannot apply for a green card while on a TN. You need to switch to a different visa type.
I actually have sorry to interrupt. I have a thing about that, but go on.
Cool. Yeah, that is an important thing, and people need to know about that one. But so I had to switch to the O1, and I was like, shit, I've won 0 awards. I won like a thing when I was in 2nd grade for writing a cool poem. So yeah, I still got that. And it was just a combination of all the other things. So don't get like completely turned off by that one because you're not Mache Kuchiara. Like, you can still get it. And it's just a matter of having enough known work experience, like a game as big as The Last of Us, that that counts for quite a bit. But so did having really good references from other. I had Shaddy write me a reference.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good old
And
Shaddy.
so yeah, and a guy from Kotaku wrote me a reference. So like people that are known in their fields and in the world of games gave me these great references, and that really went far. But I was so freaked out, but I was like, I am not going to get this. Oh, I also did talks. That's a big thing. If you go and do guest lectures at schools or at events or anything like that, that all counted. So even if you're like me and you're like, I don't think I have that, don't write that one off, and definitely talk to a lawyer like Robert about it, because they'll help you figure out. They'll know more than you do if you have the credentials for that.
Yeah, of course.
Nice plug. Thanks.
There you go. Hey,
A
why
couple-
not? Why not?
a
It's
couple
a couple
things I
thousand
want-
people watching this at the end of the day, so it's all
Yeah.
good. It's all good. Hey, I've even heard that being on a podcast like this one can help you, especially if you have a couple thousand views. So
Whoa.
you guys know what you have to do. Just share the podcast. Like, I'm just gonna shamelessly plug it right now. Share the Art Cafe to everyone. Make sure everyone subscribes. We get thousands of views. get a amount of subscriptions as PewDiePie has, and then you're just gonna be famous when I invite you. Like, hey, Maciej, can you help me with visa? Hey.
You are gonna get so
fucking
many
around.
requests now. You just
And the best part is
not gonna
not
happen.
Jay's not wrong.
Ah! Damn, that was a nail to the coffin.
dug your own grave.
I know.
Thinking.
I'm super busy, guys. I rarely respond
Everybody
to
hit up
emails.
Maciej.
So actually, sorry, I just
screwed
want to
myself
jump in.
right now.
A couple of things that I wanted to circle back to on that. So actually going back to the TN, one of the things that I've recently been working on is I've had a couple of clients who are here on the TN, and they actually have been interested in starting the green card. And Alex is right. So that the TN, you're not supposed to start the green card process, so you're not supposed to have what we would call is intent to permanently stay in the U.S. while you're on the TN. But the reality is you can do it. You just had to be careful about when you travel, because it's actually the points, where if you do international travel and you're coming back to the U.S. trying to come back to the U.S. on TN and you've got a green card in process, that's the point when it might actually cause you problems. So I'd say, talk to a lawyer if you have a TN, but you really want to start the green card through whatever mechanism. And then the other thing, I'll just circle back to what Maciej was saying, because having a good network, doing networking, having great people in the community who'd be willing to back you up later on, that's actually really important for the O1 as well. Because one of the things that's important that I think Maciej you were referencing earlier, is that you can get letters of support from other artists, other experts, other people in the industry. Alex, you were mentioning the person with Kotaku. That's great if you've got professional connections who later might be willing to write you a letter of support. That's huge.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's a piece there.
I remember when I was applying for my green card, I was told, yeah, I think 10 letters should be fine. I was like, nope, I'm going to get you 50. I want my chances to be perfect.
I don't think you can over prepare for it, for sure. It's definitely like the whole process for the O1 took me about a year, I think, to gather all the materials. And that was a lot of me dragging my feet because I was really busy at the time. But you don't want to like just rush it and like get your mom to write you a letter or something like that. Like really do your due diligence on that. My mom thinks I'm really cool. She thinks I'm good at this. She loves my art. Yeah. So spend some time figuring out who, and I also wanted to have a good variety in mind of the letters, like other artists. It wasn't only people I've worked for either. I've not worked for either of those people. And then the other person, because I think you need 3 total, was an art director that I had worked for. But I didn't just go for people I'd worked for. I also went for like people that are known in the industry, who knew my work and who knew me personally. Definitely don't just hit up strangers, by the way. Don't be like, hey, Maciej, I don't know you. Will you write me a letter of recommendation? I am definitely not telling you to do that because they will absolutely say no, as they should. But if you know a person who's fairly known, and you're comfortable with reaching out to them, don't think of it as just like, oh, it has to be a person I've worked with, because 2 of mine I didn't work with.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump into H1B, because that's probably one that might get more attention for majority of artists that could possibly get here. Again, it's not necessarily easier one because it's limited how many H1Bs are released every year for the companies. O1 doesn't have that limitation. Like you can apply pretty much anytime during the year. With H1B, it's almost like a window of opportunity that the companies actually open up hiring when they get H1Bs, and they can now get people in. Is that correct?
It's actually, so the limitation's actually coming from, so when Congress enacted the H-1B program, they put in a hard number limit and tied that limit to the government's fiscal year. So that's actually where it's coming from. So the current limit right now is 85,000 total new H-1B numbers granted per year. And Congress had in the past actually had that limit higher, but then it reverted back to this lower number. And with the U.S. Congress being as it currently is, it doesn't look like they're going to change anything with that, at least for, I don't know what's going to bring with this election, but at least until maybe the next couple of years.
Right.
So the other feature of it, like I said, it's tied to the government's fiscal year. So the government's fiscal year starts October 1st, and you can apply for an H-1B, or employers, I should say, can apply for the H-1B on starting April 1st for the following October 1st. So in other words, you have companies, let's take this coming year as an example. You're going to have a lot of companies who are going to be submitting H-1B petitions for employees they want to bring in on April 1st, 2017, hoping to get them to start on October 1st, 2017. And what's been happening with the last couple of years is that because the U.S. economy has been, improving, a lot of the U.S. employers they've started to be hiring again, and that includes for H-1Bs, and they've been filing huge numbers of H-1B petitions.
Oh.
Yeah. They've been filing those numbers of H-1B petitions where this last year, I think it was about, I want to say 240,000 petitions were filed for 85,000 slots.
Wow.
So you get a situation now where there's a lottery that the agency that does this is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or just USCIS. They run a lottery, a randomized selection of those numbers to see which ones they'll process and which ones will just not get accepted. When we were looking at the numbers at our firm, it was about maybe 40%, maybe a little bit worse than that. And we always try to warn our clients and their employees as much as we can, hey, this is going to kind of stink. The chances are not so great. It's almost like you're playing Vegas odds here, if you're going to get this or not. So that's the difficult situation right now with the H-1B. There are certain places where you could be exempt from that limit. If you work for certain types of nonprofits, they're not subjected to the H-1B, this lottery. You can just come in as a separate. Certain countries actually have other free trade agreements, Singapore and Chile. If you're from those countries, you actually have there's an H-1B1 that you could possibly qualify for that circumvents the lottery as well. So these are a couple of things where you have to really talk to a lawyer. There's a lot of details in your background that could potentially help you out a lot.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, the H-1B, it's one of the most used visa categories, but it's also, because of that, it's also now one of the more difficult ones to get.
It does require to have a degree, right? Like you have to actually have university degree.
Yeah. So
qualify.
So it focuses on what the job requires. So
Right.
if the position you're going to get sponsored for on the H-1B is a position that requires at minimum a bachelor's degree in a specific field, then it could potentially qualify for the H-1B. So
Right.
the reason I couch it that way is because there are persons out there who will have, a lot of work experience. And that combination of work experience could actually be the equivalent of a degree in U.S. immigration's eyes. So you don't necessarily, the employee, you don't necessarily have to have a degree. If you have, a significant amount of work experience in a specific field, for example, graphic design or some kind of other art field, you could get. We work with education evaluators who look at a person's past education, past experience, and they're able to determine whether that's the equivalent or not of a degree. And sometimes we're able to make the argument that this person may not have a formal degree from an institution, but they've got gobs of experience that qualifies them, and it's the equivalent of a degree,
Yeah.
and therefore they should qualify for the job. So that's actually that's something that's also important. And again, it's focused. The H-1B is focused on the position, not necessarily in terms of the requirements, not necessarily the person.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I think that it's important to note, though, because a lot of people ask me about that one, like, oh, I don't want to go to school they're student level, so like they have not had a lot of experience. That experience level is high. Like the requirement, if for them to deem that you have enough experience to like be like, hey, you don't even need to go to school. It's not based on skill. Like, and that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to let go of. Like, I don't think they necessarily care that you're very good. Like, you need to prove that in the form of having jobs. And if you're that good, you're most likely going to get jobs. But that work experience needs to be like a cumulative amount of time. Like, it can't just be, I'm real good at this.
Yeah, I think it's over 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, and there's this really shitty thing that gets said pretty frequently that if you're good enough, a company will make it work, and it's just super not true. Like if there's so many situations that could make that not work out.
Yeah.
So you can't just expect that that's how it's going to happen. Like you need to be prepared for all sorts of things.
I think the saying when you're good enough, the company's gonna make it work. It goes towards really talented people that are applying for really high positions, or being like whether it's art director or production designer for film, things that are really significant, not like just a regular concept artist, where they can argue that there's a reason why we want to have you there, or find a way to make you work one way or another. But it's not like a hop and then you can work. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and those people usually have, like, if you're getting hired into an art director position in entertainment, you have worked before. Like, you haven't just, fallen like an 18-year-old kid that's like, hey, cool, I'm an art director now. Like, that doesn't really happen in this industry. Like, if you're that good, then you've been working already. And you probably have that work experience. So the company doesn't have to do anything. Like, you meet the requirements.
It applies more to green card, I would say, than anything else. But yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. So don't trust yourself like, oh, I'm so skilled. It's no way they're gonna reject me. They will. They will just look at numbers. They don't care if you're good enough or not. The immigration officers, they're not art directors. They cannot judge whether you're good or not. They won't even judge whether you're good or not based on what company wants to hire you, because they don't care either. Like, that's not their field. They don't know how significant it is to be getting an offer from Naughty Dog or Riot Games or any other bigger company. They go, oh, this is a company I've heard about, but I don't care.
That's actually a really important point, because it's the officers they're lay people. They're definitely not experts. So that's actually something, if you're trying to make the case for yourself, you want to make sure that you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who does not have. They're just coming off the street. They don't have expertise in your field. You want to be able to try to explain why your work is significant to somebody who has no. Like, you just have to assume they have no knowledge of art history or art background or the technical aspects of what you do. Amazing as how much as amazing as they are, you're going to get a lay person at U.S. Immigration who's just being like, I don't know what this is. Why is this important?
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Alex. No, sorry.
There's a weird perception that it's the company that does that for you, and it's not. Like, they're not the ones that make that final decision. They'll hook you up with lawyers. It's a good company. Like, Naughty Dog has lawyers and everything that they utilize for stuff like this. But like, there are, like, I've worked for companies that didn't have lawyers, and I had to reach out and get my own. So it's not the company that makes that decision. The company makes the decision to hire you based on your skill set. The government and those agents, they make the decision to let you in or not. And the company does their best to prepare you and the lawyer does their best to prepare you for what you're going to expect at the border, but they are not the ones that make the final decision. The Border Patrol agent does.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. Cool. I think that covers quite a lot of confusion that is out there. We got a bunch of questions that I want to jump into, so we don't go way overboard with the amount of time we spend here, so we are all busy people. But there's a bunch of questions that people were asking along the way, so I want to jump into them and and get going. So, and some of them are actually going to touch upon the things that we haven't discussed. So that's going to be a good segue here. So let's go with the first one. They are not chronologically taken. I was just trying to sort of like copy and paste into my notepad everything that I saw. So the first one I have here is I have master's degree in industrial design at the European School of the Brittany, and I was accepted as at Les Gobelins. I don't know even what that
It's a
means.
school, Gobelin. It's like a French animation school.
Right, in Paris. Do you think it's worth it or not? I'm not
Cool
sure.
school.
I don't even know what to
For
say.
immigration, I don't think you need that. You have a master's degree. It depends on what you're trying to do, though,
Right.
because here's another important thing. Just having a degree in anything does
So
not
ignorant.
necessarily count. Like, you
Yep.
need to have a degree in a relevant field. So I studied neuroscience before going into art, and I was like, I don't want to actually do this. And that education didn't really count towards me getting a TN for graphic design. So if you want to go to that school, it's a cool school. I think they produce some really awesome stuff. Having more education is probably not going to hurt you. I wouldn't say that you need that though for a green card, unless what you're trying to do is animation and your other degree doesn't apply.
Right. I don't want to.
Absolutely.
I just don't
Yeah.
want to sound ignorant. I just literally didn't know what that school is, and it's a French name, so
Dude, look it up. They make cool stuff.
All right, I will.
They make really. You've definitely,
Calm down.
definitely
Calm
seen some
down,
shorts
Alex.
from it. You've
Alex.
definitely seen some shorts from it.
I'm
I know
pretty
you
sure I
have. There's
did.
no way you haven't.
I think I've seen some shorts, right?
Yeah, everyone. I mean,
Damn.
everyone has.
Now I sound stupid. All right. All right.
Yeah.
All good. All good. All right. Let's jump to the next one. I was supposed to be at the Zebra Sculpt Off today, but my visa was denied due to not having enough properties or for a reason to come back to South America. It's going to be more difficult for me later. I guess that person was asking to. He was coming here for like a conference or like what is it? It's like
Yeah, the
a
ZBrush Summit
yeah,
that's
ZBrush
happening
Summit,
like
yeah.
right now at
Oh, yeah.
Nomon.
and they were just denied the visa to get here.
Sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks because that's not
But
even
we're-
like work. It's just like
Yeah, wasn't it just like the visitor's visa?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
That would have been a visitor's visa, most likely. That's terrible. And I had to be honest in that. Yeah. So that visa denial, like I said, I was saying earlier, U.S. immigration is doing a much more thorough job now of getting all of their information digital and recording all of their interactions with persons who apply. So the denial is definitely in the U.S. Department of State system, I would say. And the next time you apply, it's definitely going to be in there. If you're going to be applying for a tourist visa again, you want to be prepared for that as much as you can. And I should have started off with saying that everything I'm saying, during this podcast, none of it can be taken as legal advice. Please be sure to contact your own immigration attorney if you have any specific questions to your case. That out of the way, I would say in general, if you're in a situation where you just had a visa denied, you want to usually the consulates they'll at least give you a letter explaining the reason why they denied it. You want to take that letter, take a look at it, see what they're asking for, and try to make sure you address that if you try to apply for a visa again, because that's definitely something that is going to come up the next time you do try to apply for a visa to the U.S. And in the specific case of, say, if you're trying to attend a conference or some kind of summit or something in the U.S., you want to make sure you bring if you have an invitation to that, great, bring that. If you have a pamphlet or some kind of brochure or something describing what this thing is about, that's great too, because it shows that it has a finite period. You're showing that you're just attending for that alone. You also just want to show that you have return tickets back to your home country, and any other indicia of your ties to your home country if you're just coming in for a temporary visit. So that usually, that runs along the lines of if you have a lease with an apartment you rent, or you own property, or you have a job you're coming back to after your trip, those sorts of things. Yeah, but yeah, and especially in the situation where you've had a visa denied, you're going to have to address that stuff.
Yeah, if you want to come back to America for whatever reason in the future, I would say it's worth the hassle to actually take care of it now and make sure that what exactly happened. Let's get an explanation if there's something that I did wrong, or is that just a mistake from the other side. Just getting that cleared out, it's gonna get your chances better, I think, for the next time. Again, as you said,
Also,
Robert, it's all opinions here, so it's not a legal
also
advice.
a part of that, as somebody who I spent so much time doing my own research on the internet and reading, like I think I read the entire USCIS website at some point. Like I just read everything, and it's not enough because it is so complicated, as law tends to be.
Super
Um,
convoluted.
and so I know a lot of people shy away from the thought of getting a lawyer and paying for somebody because there's this perception that's very expensive. But if you are serious about coming into the US, I promise you that there's probably something about your case that's unique to you. And so the best bet is to pay somebody to go
Yeah.
over it with you. And it didn't, like mine with you, Robert, never took very long. It was always like an hour or something. We would just sit and talk, and you would, talk about all of the layout for me, all of the things that, could be getting in the way of whatever it was I was trying to do at the time. And so it's not like this crazy, like you're going to be on a 5-hour phone call that's going to cost you like $10,000 or anything insane
Yeah.
like that. Consider it an investment.
Yeah.
It's like it's an investment in your future, just like buying Photoshop or buying ZBrush or something.
Exactly.
Like you're trying to immigrate, and then it's important to build up that relationship and find an immigration lawyer that works for you, and stick with them, because then they can follow you through the entire process. Because I promise you, it's not a one-time thing. You have to kind of keep going back to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I wanted to touch on that, as like we're giving you, like obviously Robert is a professional giving professional advice, but your individual situations are going to be vastly different. And as somebody who tried doing it on my own, I say definitely get yourself a lawyer, because yeah, it just makes it easier, and it also is less stress. Like I was
Yeah.
very stressed out all the
Yeah.
time trying to do it on my own.
You don't want to do everything, especially something you're not specialized in. You might make a typo, a mistake in, checking the wrong bracket, and you're gonna get denied because you were just stupid. That's basically how it works. Robert, I have a question to you actually in regards of as we were talking about visas. Could you tell us a little bit of like give us a ballpark of what's the cost of getting an O1 or H1B?
Ooh.
Like you don't
I
have to
don't.
be very specific. It could be just a ballpark of what you can
Yeah.
expect when you're coming in, and just sort of to give it a prefix. A lot of that stuff going to be covered as your relocation package, which bigger companies do when they want to get you in and they apply and sponsor you the visa. That's what they are taking care of. But if for whatever reason you find a company that's, "Oh, we really want you, but you have to find your own lawyer and go through the process yourself." Well, let's put the number on what that means.
I don't know if I could, and okay, this is going to sound like I'm trying to get out of answering the question, but a
Right.
lot of times, the specific cases, like Alex was saying, a lot of specific cases, there are a lot of very fact specific
Mm-hmm.
things that could make a case easier or harder. So I really couldn't. I'd be doing a disservice, I think, honestly.
Sure.
And this is,
I get it.
this may sound like BS. I don't want to. It's absolutely true. I don't want to put a figure on things, only because each case can be so vastly different.
Are there
I
like
can't.
specific USCIS fees that like
Yes.
this is the starting point?
Yeah. No, I can definitely go into that for sure.
Okay, cool.
The fee. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm blacking out on my own. Hold on a moment. Let me look them up while I've got here.
You can
But
find
yes,
them on
there are.
on the website, by the way, for those who just
Yeah.
like yeah.
So I think Alex mentioned it earlier. There is one of the great resources to go to is the USCIS website, and it's just www.uscis.gov. And the website's actually pretty great because it does have not only access to all of the applicable laws, the what we call the Immigration and Nationality Act, but it also has access to, you can look at all the regulations that are a subset of that, and it has all the forms for free with instructions. So by the way, if anybody's charging you for these forms, run away. Don't pay that fee because they're free. They're online for you. You can download them, you can print them out, you can fill them out on your own. Of course, when it comes to legal questions or how to fill them out, you may want to contact a professional who will be able to help you, but never pay a fee for the actual forms. So let me just refresh myself here. So for an H-1B, as an example, there's a base filing fee of $325 US. And then there are going to be some additional fees probably associated with that, depending on your specific situation. There are a lot of different variables that go into that, so that I really wouldn't want to go into that. But typically, an employer, if they really want you, they're probably going to cover those fees already. For the O1, the fees actually, it's similar, it's $325. There's also something that called premium processing, where you can ask U.S. Immigration to process your case faster.
I did that. It's really good.
Yeah, I like to call it. It's almost perverse. You basically you're straight up paying the U.S. government extra additional money for them to do something faster, and they'll do it. So
no, yeah, they do it, and you get it really fast, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But the fee for that currently is $1,225. And I do work with, there's a variety of employers who will cover that fee. There are also some employers who aren't willing to, but you can, if you want to put the cash down, you can cover that fee yourself.
I did that
that's
myself.
A choice.
Yeah,
Sorry?
me too.
Yeah.
It was totally worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. Do it.
Took 3 days.
So the U.S. government is supposed to process your case within a max of 15 calendar days. Sometimes they do it much faster than that, but the premium processing service is there, so that's also something that's available. And then in terms of if you have to apply for a visa stamp, and I'm just looking this up myself because I always forget. But just be aware that you also, if you're applying for a visa at a U.S. consulate or embassy, there are also going to be fees sometimes associated there. Typically, you're going to be looking at, I think it's $180 currently for a lot of the work type non-immigrant visas. If you're doing an immigrant visa, if you're coming in as going to be a permanent resident, it's usually a lot more. But all of this information, it's easily found online. You can easily just click or do a search for visa application fees or filing fees, and again, the USCIS website itself is a great resource.
Yeah. Great. All right, let's get another one. There's a few more. I don't know how much time you have, Robert, by the way, so
I'm good.
Really mindful. All right, let's get going. Where is it? What is the difference? What are differences between working and student visas in U.S.?
It's a good question.
It's a pretty broad question too, right?
A little bit, but I can probably sum it up. So the student visas are specifically in U.S. immigration law. Student visas are specifically for you're coming into the U.S. to study either at a university or college specifically, or there are also exchange type student visas. I think the one that people are probably familiar with is the J1, and you're coming in under a specific type of visa that allows for internship experiences or exchange experiences where you're learning stuff with a company, but you're working as an intern for them, that sort of thing. So I think the main difference really is that for student visas, the purpose is that you're supposed to be acquiring knowledge, which you are intending to take back to your home country with you. Now, in reality, of course, that what ends up happening is a lot of people will come in on the F1 visa, for example, is specific to studying at a university or college program, and then they'll stay in the U.S. Through a number of different mechanisms. Or if they come in on a J1, there's something that's called the 2-year home residence requirement, where you basically, after you've finished your J1, you have to return back to your home country for 2 years. But there are very narrow but still ways around that. Versus the work visas, where the purpose is definitely explicitly you're coming to work in the United States. It's not just for study anymore. You're not just gaining information. You're going to be in a working role in employment. So I think that's that is vastly simplifying it, but that is the answer, I think, in terms of that.
You also you cannot do freelance on that visa. So you actually can't do freelance on any visa except for the green card. So you have to do work for the company that you've been hired for. And Robert, you might know some way around this. Like maybe you make your own company or something. But as far as I know, that is like ridiculous and you can't do it. And so if you rely on freelance income, if you're like, oh, this job doesn't pay that much, but I can still do my freelance, doesn't matter if it's in a different country, as I learned from Robert, doesn't matter if it's your home country and it's going to your home bank, it is still in violation of your visa. So you cannot do that. Yeah. It's very important to know that.
It is really important to know that. And the reality is, hey, how's the U.S. immigration going to know if I'm just, doing a commission piece just randomly? And the problem, the reality is, or what's going to happen is, U.S. immigration might not find out, but you don't want to take that chance, because again, they have better computing facilities now. They have more access to financial records. A lot of that could somehow come out. You just don't want to risk it. And the other thing there is that it's where you physically are. If you're physically in the United States, and you're doing freelance work that is not authorized by the specific visa that you're on, again, who knows if they might if U.S. immigration might detect it, but if they do, you're in trouble, and that could mean that you lose your status.
Definitely. You don't want to risk that. It's better to play safe than sorry. If you really want to freelance, then don't come in yet. If it just happens that you freelance for big studios and big directors and big names, and you might create a portfolio that's going to be good enough for you to go straight into a green card without even applying for a visa. But I agree with you, Robert. It's from my experience of the advice I was getting, don't risk it, because if it comes out, you're done with the United States pretty much. It's going to be your last visit here for whatever reason.
Yeah, you never want to violate your status. And again, either the lawyer that they hook you up with your company, or the lawyer that you pay for yourself.
Right.
Just confirm with them if you can do something. Like when I was looking to do a job for a Canadian company while on a TN, I messaged Robert about it and we talked about it, and he walked through all of the reasons why I couldn't do it. And of course, you're still frustrated because it's like, why though? I'm not taking a job from an American. But it's not, like, as he explained, that's not necessarily how the thought process is.
Yeah.
And I think if you remember, I was frustrated by that because I think,
that was frustrating.
Honestly, so I'm going to just be real for a moment and say the law about that in the U.S. is stupid.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's stupid. And that's what I have to feel about that.
Yeah.
Tell
makes
him,
no
Robert.
sense. Tell him, Robert.
Testify.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's pretty archaic. It's like maybe applied 50 years ago or something, but not now. 100% agree. I don't even know if you can start the company here. I know that if you can, you still cannot make money under it. You can be a manager that it's only doing an oversight pro bono. I think that's how it works. And if the company is starting to make money, you have to pay it out to the employees that you have and not yourself. So you really have no options but get a green card. If you really want to be freelancing or working for more than one client, having a O1 or H1B visa, it's not really an option here. So
You can do the thing. So O1s, you can have multiples of them.
Right.
So if you have a client and they really, really want to work with you, they can sponsor you for your second O1 visa or your third or whatever. And
Yeah.
you can like technically work for multiple people on an O1. But that means you have to go through the process of applying for an O1 visa
Which
for
is a
every
couple of
one of those clients.
$1,000, and
Yeah.
also it means that you're not overlapping the time you work on one or other job. You know, you cannot just say I worked full time here and then I worked full time here as well. Like that's not gonna fly at all because that's just a conflict of one or other visas. So, from my understanding, I'm
You can actually
definitely
do parallel H-1Bs. You have to find employers who might be willing to work with you on that. But I have done or I've worked with folks who have done part-time H-1B with one company and part-time H-1B with another company. So that's
right.
actually doable too. But yeah, it's a rare situation.
It's difficult, and it's only worth it when you really have something long term going, and you know that you know that specific employer wants to hold your services for a longer time, not just a couple of weeks. Because if it's just a couple of weeks, the amount of money you're gonna make, you're probably gonna spend on just getting the paperwork
Yeah,
out of the
maybe.
way. So more or less, at least. Depends when you
Honestly,
are where you
clients are
are too.
pretty understanding though. Like,
Yeah.
so when I moved down here and I had to ditch a bunch of clients who were really good clients because I had established myself before moving down here. And then when I moved down here, I had to be a student for a year and a half because I didn't have the right credentials and I really wanted to stay here. So I got on a student visa, could not do freelance anymore, could barely support myself. Don't recommend doing this, by the way. If you need to get your credentials, do them in your home country,
Yeah.
where if you can, because at least you can still work when you're in your home country. I did a really stupid thing, so I wouldn't redo it.
Right.
But I stayed here and I didn't work, and yeah, I had to say goodbye to clients that I'd had for years that were awesome to me, and they were very understanding and were like, "You're pursuing what you want to do, and we appreciate." I was just very upfront with them, like I can't actually do work with you anymore because of my current visa situation. So yeah, it was a shitty conversation to have. I wish I could have kept them. And I actually still keep in contact with them and now I can do freelance, so I can actually go back to talking to them 6 years after the fact. But we'll see if they're interested in still working with me. But
Some of the more I had very similar situation where I just straight out had to reject the work and say I cannot do it. And then once I got my green card, they were back like, "How's your situation now?" And they're like, "Yeah, I can work." Oh, perfect, let's do it. It's if here's the thing, if your work is really great, like if you're really putting it out there, then you're not going to have a problem finding clients, and the good ones will always come back. Like if they're happy with your services before, or if they are asking you, you cannot do it now, but you can tell, like you're going to be in the process of getting a green card. You can always keep checking in and saying like, "Hey, I just got my green card and I'm ready to go. So if you guys need anything in the future, let me know." You can always do that. They're not gonna be like, "Who the fuck are you?" you know. If you're good, if they knew you before, then I'm pretty sure that they'll come back to you. Cool. A few more questions. Few of them we can answer really shortly. First one is really. I think it's a really easy sort of. Or at least I think so. To answer, how long does it take to get a green card after O1? There's 3 different types of green cards, right?
Yeah. Well, so it depends on which mechanism you go through. So I guess roughly there's kind of 2 tracks. So the O1 doesn't necessarily lock you into a specific track, although it makes it easier for one of them. So one of the tracks could actually be family based. So if you have say like a U.S. citizen spouse, they could actually sponsor you for a green card that way. So you could get into the U.S. for example on an O1, meet somebody fantastic, fall in love, and then get married, and that person happens to be a U.S. citizen. That's actually a valid way of I'm not saying you should get married to get a green card. That's actually specifically not allowed. But if you happen to be in that situation, fantastic. That is a way that you could get a green card.
They can
The other
audit you,
way,
right? If you do it like in a shady way, they can still audit you for period of time, right? Just to check if
Yes.
if you're really living with your spouse and
Oh yes,
yeah,
I haven't had have not had this happen to me, but I have heard stories of where immigration officers go out to the address that somebody had listed on their application to actually see if they live together. I've heard of people actually running into the situation where they weren't living together because it was a marriage to get a green card, and then they got
yeah,
totally dinged for it. So yeah, so you like I said, you have to be genuinely marrying somebody because you love them and you intend to be married with that person.
right,
And then, by happy circumstance, that person you're marrying happens to be a U.S. citizen, and they can sponsor you for a green card that way. The other way is because the O1, a lot of it overlaps with I think I mentioned earlier, the EB1. That's an immigrant visa type that, again, is for extraordinary ability. It's for outstanding persons, and that's no less true for persons who are absolutely outstanding in art. If you meet that certain high level, you may qualify for that, and that's one of the green card processes that could work for you. Typically you're going to have an employer who's helping you work through that process. Um, so that might be a mechanism there. And then there are other, there are other employment-based green card mechanisms that aren't as high level. They require the employer to do basically like a market test to show that they couldn't employ anybody else who's got the particular requirements that you have. But that is also another way through an employment-based route to get a green card.
yeah,
I don't want to get into the details of that because that could take a whole podcast in
yeah,
itself.
for sure.
But, but
I
it,
can
it's
only
yeah.
I can only say that I think EB1 it's the best one to get because it takes literally several months and you should be able to work. There's EB2, which is similar. It's just different technicalities. By the way, you can read all of that on USCIS website. It's all listed there with
Yep.
exact dates and waiting times. And I know the EB3, which is the one that most of people will be eligible for. Uh, that's the one where you wait years. Like it can be 8 years, 5 years. I think it's no less than 5 years of you
Yeah.
working for a company and they're renewing your current visa. So that's an interesting part, by the way. So I think in O1 you can renew it any like how many times you want without applying for green card, right? But H1B, that's the one that during the process, during the period of time you're being employed on H1B, you have to apply for a green card in order to stay when your H1B expires, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah,
at the H-1B, you have a hard limit of 6 years. If you've been in the once you are in the U.S. for 6 years in H-1B status, then you have to either leave or you need to have some other mechanism that allows you to stay.
right.
The O1 doesn't have that. The O1 doesn't have an upper limit. Although if you keep renewing your O1 without doing anything else, U.S. immigration does start asking more questions because again, the O1 and the H1B are non-immigrant visas. Technically, you're not supposed to be intending to stay permanently.
Right.
Um, it, so the H1B and the O1 have this thing called dual intent, where you actually are allowed to look for a green card while you're on them. But at the same time, if you're just repeatedly renewing your O1, U.S. immigration starts asking more and more questions as time passes.
Yeah.
That's the
true.
same with the TN. If you are a Mexican or Canadian citizen and you're applying for one of the NAFTA, NAFTA's great, by the way. I love it. So if you're applying for the NAFTA, the wonderful NAFTA visas, you can renew those. They go up to 3 years. I think they used to be just 1 year, but now they'll give it to you for 3 years, and then you can keep renewing that. But I do believe that over time they're like, really, you're on your like sixth TN visa, okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I know that if you're H1B, it has a hard limit of 6 years. But if you're in a process of getting a green card, so I think it's you're on one of the application statuses that
Yeah.
automatically allows you to renew until you get accepted or rejected on your green card.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the long and short of it is if you're at certain points in the green card process, yeah, the law does allow you to keep extending that H-1B
Yeah.
while you're waiting for your green card to resolve.
Yeah, that's true. There was another question which I think I can answer. It's pretty simple. The buddy of mine lives in Serbia and wants to work in the United States. Are there any different procedures he should look into, particularly since he's not part of the EU? No, it's pretty much for the whole world. It's the same procedure. It doesn't really matter unless it's like you said. You're a citizen of a specific country that applies for specifically for H-1B, like Chile. I don't remember which ones you mentioned there, or like if it's student status. But in most cases, majority of the countries going to have the same sort of laws, right?
Yeah, for the most part. So the
Yeah.
specific ones, that are usually standouts are, we were already talking about them: Canada, Mexico. The ones that are the H-1B1 countries are Singapore and Chile. And then actually Australia has an E3 visa, which is it is kind of like an H-1B, except they don't have the quota either.
Right.
So those specific countries, yeah, those are if you're from one of those countries, you have an extra in that you might not if you're from another country.
Yeah.
For Serbia specifically, I'd say it's the quote unquote normal what you're going to have to deal with, unfortunately.
The Australian one seems even better than the TN ones. In other words, because like my buddy at work has one.
Australians are very chill, man.
They are, but his had like crazy thing. Like his wife could get in on his too as well, which is not. Oh, maybe you can do that with the TN. I guess I never tried, but.
Well, yeah. So the TN spouses of TNs, that'd be the TD. They're able to come into the U.S. on the TD, but they can't work. If I remember right, spouses of E3s though from Australia can. And
that was the thing. Yeah, she
Yeah.
could work, and I was like, dang,
For
Australia.
H-1B and O1 is the same thing. Your family cannot work when you're on that visa. They come in for O1. I believe it's O3 for your family, and I think for your I don't remember what business partners or some weird categories like O2 or guardian. I don't kind of remember exactly what that was. Like a personal helper, but not family.
Like I forget what the exact terminology. If you're coming as if you're a nanny, a personal assistant or something like that, there is a really narrow exception there. Yeah. Actually, for H-1Bs, something important that recently happened, thanks Obama, is certain if you have dependents of H-1Bs are called, they have an H-4 visa type. If you reach certain parts in the green card process, and if you're an H-1B holder, you've reached certain parts in the green card process, and you have a spouse who's on H-4, that spouse can actually apply for employment authorization.
Yeah.
Have to wait a while, but that's available now. So that is something that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Obama's great.
Yep.
Thanks, Obama.
Let's keep him.
Let's keep him. What about Trump? Let's not get into that conversation.
Nope.
I don't want this to be
never talking about that.
Politically infused. There's two more questions. One, I'm actually a permanent resident in the U.S. Does Robert know anything about permanent U.S. residents moving to Canada for work?
I do not. I'm sorry.
I might. Just because you're a permanent resident in the U.S. doesn't have any implication for you moving to Canada. You have to be a citizen to get the NAFTA treatment. Like if you're asking if you could get a NAFTA visa because you're a permanent resident, I don't believe that you can.
Yeah, it's separate. From what I know,
it's a separate thing.
From what I know, you cannot be outside of the country for more than a year if you're a visa or a green card holder. You have to apply for like a leave extension or something like that. That basically says,
permit.
That it's gonna be more than a year, but I will come back, and they have to approve it. I think if it's under the year, again, you go on the USCIS website. It's all there. There's actual numbers that you can check. It's pretty informative. And the last question is, as an international student graduating in the US, can you apply for OPT, which is the only valid a certain amount of time after you graduate? Is there alternative that isn't that time sensitive?
Yeah, so OPT, that stands for optional practical training. And actually, let me back up a little bit. So for persons who come in specifically on the F1 visa to study at a U.S. college or university, the immigration law does make available this period of short employment authorization called OPT. So it's a period of a year after you finish your study. So one of the key things is you had to finish the studies. You have to get your degree towards what you were working for. And then you're able to work in the U.S. For a year. The purpose of that is to basically get a chance to practice what you've learned at the U.S. institution. And for a lot of people, what they try to do on that is they try to get employed or have an employer bring them on for hopefully a longer term period. And a lot of employers they'll try to go the H-1B route. Well, they'll try to file an H-1B petition for that person and hopefully get a visa number. As we were discussing earlier in the podcast, that there's a lottery now and it makes it very difficult. The other thing, though, that just recently happened that maybe you might be aware of is something called the STEM OPT extension. So STEM is short for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If your degree was in one of these STEM fields, then you may be able to ask for an additional 24 months or 2 years on top of the initial 1 year. So in other words, a total of 3 years of work authorization after you finish your F1 program. So one of the key things here is that the studies you enter has to be in one of these STEM fields. Now, I know for a lot of folks who are in art, that may be difficult. If you are doing certain fields of art that are oriented around computers or video games or something like that, you might actually have a degree that qualifies. There is a list of the degrees that qualify online. You can easily find it. You can just type in an internet search STEM list, and it should bring up the list for you. So if you do qualify for that, that's great. You have that is an alternative if you're not getting an H-1B number right away, or if you're not finding an employer who might be willing to sponsor you for the H-1B. If you're able to qualify for the STEM extension, that could be an alternative to hopefully at least give you more time here. And the other half of that is that to qualify for this, you do need to work for an employer who's enrolled in the what's called the E-Verify program in the United States. Mm-hmm. And that's basically just this system that U.S. employers can voluntarily sign up for. It's run by the U.S. federal government. It's an online system where they can check if you're work authorized to be in the U.S. or sorry, authorized to work in the U.S. I should say. So those
familiar with that recently.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So that if you're on that track, again, it's you have to kind of give some forethought to the degree program that you enter, and I more than anyone else can understand completely if you want to enter a program that might not be on the STEM list, but it's what you do, that's who you are, and that's where you want to go. Just be aware that if you enter a STEM degree, you do have more opportunities there.
Yeah. So sorry, artists, you're screwed.
But don't do science because it's practical, because I tried that and it didn't work out for me. So just do what you love.
Yeah. All right. I think we went through all of the legal questions. I think it's a good time to wrap it up. We've been on the stream for a little longer, actually way longer than we normally do. This was super informative. I'm really happy for Alex to you being here, even though you didn't speak as much as we expected, and that's fine because we had really important topics to cover, and Robert was more than great in giving us a really more professional looking details into why and what and everything. Again, it's none of it's actual legal advice. You have to in order to get actual legal advice, you have to hire a lawyer. That's when the legal advice happens. It's all information that we want to bring here and make it as possible, as close to you as possible, and give you as many resources as we can. You know, I've been through this process. Alex been through this process. We have stories that go along with it, good and bad ones too. It's a convoluted thing, and you can easily get lost. I think the best thing I can say here is, if you want to move to US, if your portfolio is good enough and you have opportunities to move here, well, think about two things. Are you moving here for work, or are you moving here for lifestyle? If you're moving here for lifestyle, then do all the research you can and be smart about why you're coming here. Get a lawyer and get everything as easy for you as you can. Don't try to do it yourself because you think you can do it. Well, the chances are you can, but there's also a chance that you may fail because of mistakes and errors, and you can only then blame yourself for it. If you're thinking just coming for work, well, I would say think about it a couple of times before you pull the trigger, because again, you cannot freelance here. You're gonna be stuck for a couple of years at one work, so it's not like you can change jobs that easily. It takes an effort. It takes time. It can be even more convoluted just to change jobs while you're on the visa process. In some cases, it means you actually have to go back to your country for a certain amount of time. So try to get as much experience as you can being outside of US. And if you're just coming for work, think about maybe trying to freelance for that company. See if that works. If it can open some doors later on, and you just want to commit for a couple of years and work for a specific company and then go back, that's an option too. But yeah, I think that's it. Thanks again, Robert, for your time. You've been more than generous being here and talking with us. I've left your associates or your company link on. It's under the description of this stream, so you guys can certainly go there and seek for some legal advice.
And I didn't talk much, but I painted a flower. So
yeah, looks rad as fuck. Alex, I should get you on the next stream very soon.
That was stressful. I didn't have anything planned. And Mache's like, "Hey, are you gonna paint something?" I was like, "Oh shit, I guess."
But it'll be fun to actually talk about art too.
Yeah, sure. Whatever. This was way more informative, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Robert, because you're the
I
best.
warned you guys I was going to talk a lot about myself. I apologize.
No,
it's all good. That's
the
why
thing
you're
that
here.
I think people are here. I mean, they can watch me paint. They can extrapolate what I'm doing from watching it. And I actually kind of finished this. Like, I'll probably do stuff to it later. But like, oh, okay, cool, I'm done. But yeah, I mean, people always talk about art, but they rarely talk about the pains of immigrating here. They'll usually just like, oh, they'll figure it out. It's like,
yeah, don't forget about, it's a family decision too, and you have to take really a lot of things to consideration before you decide like, oh, I'm just gonna move here. It's not that easy. So a lot of things, like you just, if it's a lifestyle decision, then yeah, it might be an easy decision. But if it's just like, I'm moving for work and that's it, well, there's a lot of layers to it that it's just going to be really applying to your personal perspective and life, and where you're at with your life right now, where you're at with your family and everything. All of those things can be really detrimental, whether you should be moving or not. So something to think about. Anyways, let's wrap it up, guys. Thanks again for Robert for being us with here and answering all the questions we threw at him. And Alex for painting beautiful flowers.
I painted a flower.
Painted flowers. All right, guys. Till the next one. There's a couple of interesting guests coming soon, including Alex as well, maybe in the future.
Yeah. All right.
And let's wrap it up. Take care, guys, and till the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.